Hi, afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining myself and Joanna today. I'm going to be really and completely honest with you. So we have actually pre-recorded this webinar, so we're not live. But for those digital leaders who are actually attending on the scheduled session on Tuesday the 20th, we are here. We're in the chat awkwardly watching ourselves. But we really encourage you to please send us questions. We will respond on the chat. And we do urge you to reach out to us afterwards if you want to explore anything further, because we are really collaborative. Joanna and I, between the two of us, we work with Sopra Steria, and we head up the specialist function for vulnerability, inclusion, and well-being. And part of our day-to-day jobs is building digital solutions that are inclusive, accessible, equitable, and we're always looking to generate fair outcomes for all. So I think our work has taken us to lots of different, I'll say, places. We've worked with organizations who might be supermarket employers or retail banks, or even gas distribution networks. And I think one of the things that is always common is people. They all engage with people. And what we're all trying to do is build great digital solutions that our people can engage with. And what's been quite surprising for us, I think, over these last few years is how many of those organizations have come to us and said, you know, how could you help us motivate and encourage our people to engage more with this flashy, super slick, so uber cool digital service? And Joanna and I, we've learned a lot of lessons. We've used many different techniques, and we've done a lot of thinking in this area. So over the next 30 or 40-ish minutes, we're going to try and share some of those learnings, and most certainly you'll get some of our opinions. I'm going to facilitate more of a discussion and prompt Joanna to put it all out there and tell us what she's learned. We do prefer feedback. We love challenges. And we're super keen to make some friends with other digital leaders. So please do join us, reach out. You'll see our emails at the end, reach out in the chat. But also, you know, we want this to be sort of not just engaged today, but how can we all come together to influence more around digital enablement? So, yeah, I think before we kick off, Joanna, I'm gonna ask you a quick fire question to get your brain into gear.
Get our brains in gear. Yeah.
So how does the internet make you feel?
A lot of the time it makes me feel empowered. I love information, a bit of an information junkie. I come from a long line of people that love to research things. And I love the fact that you can research things and have more confidence in your purchasing decisions. So a lot of the time, I guess the internet makes me feel confident and informed. Of course, if you see in the news about data leaks and things, could make you feel a bit wary. How about you? How does the internet make you feel?
A little bit stupid sometimes, because I don't have to think anymore. It's all there. It's all immediate, and it actually makes me worry a little bit about I'm not patient anymore. So I'm starting to think about how much time I spend on the internet. But yeah, it does make me everything accessible, doesn't it?
Yeah. Do you think that's changed over time? Like, do you remember when you got your first sort of internet-enabled phone? How did you feel about the internet then?
Oh, I felt super cool there. And actually, I had a BlackBerry, so I felt really connected. Actually, this is a good question. So back then, I felt really connected and important and proud of it. But now I want to completely disconnect.
Yes.
And almost if you said to me, oh, go back to the BlackBerry, I'd probably say, yes, thank you very much. I'll just have my email connected and nothing else. But yeah. Maybe
I don't think back in the 10 years, 15 years ago, when you first started getting smartphones, we'd have thought that digital fasting could become a new trend. Hey?
Yeah. Okay. All right, I've got some more, and you don't know
Okay.
these ones, but and they're a bit more pertinent to our discussion today. So,
Okay.
is the goal of digital inclusion, and I say inclusion, is it to get everyone online? Oh wait, hang on. You've got 2 sentences max.
Oh, okay. I'll keep it brief then. No, I don't think it is our decision who is online, but I think the opportunity should be there. So it's to create the opportunity for anyone that wants to be online.
Okay, so then whose responsibility is it to help those who are digitally excluded?
Okay, I think again there's 2 parts to it. So I think access to internet and access to internet affordably is so key in society that I think government and public sector has a role to play there to ensure affordable access to the internet. But in terms of inclusion in specific services, I think it's every service owner's responsibility to ensure that all people can make the most of that service. So I think it's a combination. I wouldn't expect any particular retailer or service provider to be particularly going out of their way to ensure that people can afford internet access. But I do think each of us as digital leaders holds a responsibility for whether people can make the most of our services.
Okay, really good, strong response, but it was 6 sentences.
Oh, what? Okay, I'll get them shorter.
Okay, so today, digital enablement. How do you define digital enablement?
I would say digital enablement, I'm choosing my words carefully here now, is the sort of art and the science of actively helping people become more confident in their use of internet services.
Nice. Okay. And this one's maybe a little bit into the deep end for you, or not as kind as the others, but is it morally right to encourage people to use online services, even if this means exposing them to things like scamming?
Oh, yes. I think it's always morally right to create inclusion and give people a choice, but you always have to hold that intention with also protecting them from harms and enabling people to protect themselves from harms.
Yeah, yeah, so true. Okay, thank you, Joanna. And you nailed
Okay.
it. So getting now into a little bit of the meat of our agenda, I previously asked Joanna to consider the top 3 challenges that she believes we all need to overcome when it comes to digital enablement. And then once we've explored, or you can take them one at a time if you prefer, but when you tell us what those challenges are, can we look at how we can overcome those challenges, what the barriers are to overcoming those challenges, and hopefully we can have a good discussion between the 2 of us. I'm going to try and ask questions that I believe the audience would want to know. So good luck.
Yeah, that sounds good. So I love a bit of alliteration. So to make it, because I think it helps make things easier to remember. So the challenges that I think there are, the main ones that we as digital leaders need to overcome, are the myths that persist in our own minds and in the minds of customers. So that's a perceptual barrier to inclusion and making full use of digital services. And then mistrust, which sometimes extends from those myths, but is sometimes perpetuated with the fast pace of digitization and also how providers of digital services maybe have pushed people to digitize faster than has felt comfortable. And then the third, I was scraping the barrel for alliteration here, but it's about being the mass market nature of most digital services and the fact that you have one journey, or you may have varieties of that journey, but it needs to be available to as many different people as possible. But also the challenge there is the fact that not all people are the same. You have huge variety of capabilities in terms of people's digital confidence. So it's having a proposition that might be mass market without thinking of your customers as being a homologous mass.
Interested to see how many people have to Google that last word.
Homologous.
Okay.
And that's
Okay.
A-level chemistry there, isn't it?
So do you want to start then by telling us what some of those myths are? That might be a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and by the way, I think a picture sometimes speaks 1,000 words. So for some of the more complex ideas that I was hoping to share, I put together some slides. So we'll ping them up then. But most of all, I want it to be a discussion. So, yeah, and first talking about myths then. So I would define a myth as something that we believe to be true, whether subconsciously or consciously, but which aren't true, but nonetheless shape the way that we think about people and their experiences of our services. That is, they're sort of perceptual barriers, which can stifle innovation and progress unless we call them out of the shadows and acknowledge what is true instead. So the first and most fundamental myth with regards to digital enablement is that I think some people, maybe subconsciously, certainly wouldn't admit it, think that someone is either online or offline. You're either a digital adopter or you're not. And that's a myth, because I think we probably, if we thought for more than 2 seconds, would realise that there's a huge spectrum, which might even vary by task or context. So logging in once doesn't mean that someone is confident using all your online services. Being forced to use online services when there wasn't an option in COVID doesn't mean that's going to remain someone's preference afterwards. So that's where you have this concept of hybrid users, which is people that have a mix of channel preferences depending on context or task. For example, my background is financial services, so a lot of the examples I'll share is from there. And UK finance and industry bodies say that 84% of over 65s use online banking, and that rises to 93% for under 35s. Yet I know from working in financial services that there's definitely not 84% of people over 65 doing all their banking online. It's just not true. And actually Lloyds Banking have shared that their active user base is 60%, so somewhat lower. And I say we probably know from my own experience, I don't know about you, Kerry, but I'll pick and choose when digital is right for me.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I just want to go back to your nice little diagram. Are you showing a diagram?
Not at the minute, not for this
I
one.
just wanted to check, because I thought, you bigged it up a bit.
Oh, sorry, yeah, no, I have one for the next one. Yeah.
It's coming, okay. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay. So for the next one then, so I do have a picture for this one, so I'll just quickly share that one. That's my holding screen. Right, so here we go, big reveal. I love a donut chart. Yeah, so this one here, I think there is a myth that inclusion is inevitable, because the number of people who were digitally included and have online access rose from 92% before the pandemic to 94% afterwards. So that means that you've got a significant proportion of UK adults who are now online. As I said before, that doesn't mean they're doing everything online. However, of the 4%, the 6% who are offline, 69% of them say there's literally nothing that would induce them to go online in the next year. So that means you've got a group there. It's a minority, but it's it's still a group of 6% of UK adults who are going to be resistant to any attempts to support them in going online. But perhaps the more interesting point for this is that 7% of those who are currently online are at risk of losing connectivity because of rising costs. The Digital Poverty Alliance, a big shout out to them for the work that they do in this space. They reported earlier this year that 2.5 million households are already behind on their broadband bills. And that means that they risk getting disconnected. And then if you, I guess, think even more about the affordability of being online, whether it's a laptop or a tablet, or for many people it's a mobile device, that has a cost to it as well. And if your household bills are pinched, you're probably not going to be updating your phone as quickly, or you maybe can't afford to replace the laptop when it gets broken. And the fast pace of innovation is something to be celebrated. We do celebrate it as digital leaders, but the fast pace also creates quite a high redundancy rate, where devices are no longer working with the apps that you want to use, or indeed the battery no longer works if it's not plugged in. And so that means that there's a cost to staying connected. So I don't think we can assume that now 94% of people who are currently online will stay online.
Mm.
And unfortunately, that also correlates with existing inequalities, by which we mean if there are factors such as race, gender, age, income that lead to exclusion in other aspects of life, it's likely to also lead to digital exclusion. And then those things together lead to things called poverty premiums, which is where if you can't afford, so if you're on a low income, you're more likely to pay more for the essentials in life. And in specific to this, if you can't afford to be online and to shop online, you'll probably end up paying more for other things because you can't shop around. And then that means they're less affordable too. And that, you know, that ranges from everything from essential bills to buying a mattress. My auntie is digitally excluded, and it was a real eye-opener going to a shop with her to look at mattresses. And I was walking around like I always do, looking at the same mattresses online, being like, auntie, like, you could be getting 30% off with this discount code. She said she doesn't know about discount codes. You don't get discount codes if you walk down the high street. So yeah, I think it's a myth that inclusion is inevitable. And also it's a myth that it's won by traffic. Yeah.
When you said about the 69% say nothing will prompt them to go online, I picture myself at any restaurant at the moment where you no longer talk to a waitress or waiter about what you want to order. You have to log on, create an account, put your order in. Those people who want something quite unique or just different, or don't want tomato sauce, and you're going to do all of that online. And it's such a horrendous experience sometimes. And you just want to be like, I just want to talk to somebody. And I'm so capable of doing this online, but oh my gosh, no, thank you.
Yes, so even and so you would be in the 94% that are online, but contextually, there are some occasions when you actually want to just claim that you're in that 6%. I don't have a phone. Can I talk to a person now, please?
Yeah.
It's hard, isn't it? Okay, I'll move on to the next myth. I've got a picture for this one as well, you see. So it's a myth that access is the same as inclusion, and I'll explain what I mean by that. 1 in 5 UK internet users has their access solely via mobile phone. And you might think, how convenient. Joanna's just, shared an example of walking around a shop looking for best value on her phone. In fact, I even stand in the queue at shops and quickly see if I can get like a discount code online and see if they'll honour it at the till. That's how bad I am with, or good I am at discount codes. I love the internet. But if you're solely a mobile user, that means that you're more likely to be defined as what's called a narrow user of the internet. And that's because those listening into this call will know, if you design web and app content, sometimes the app is simpler than the website. But if you're only using the app or the mobile version of the app, you're not maybe getting the full experience. Also, if people have committed the cardinal sin and not designed that content to be responsive on a mobile, then they may only be seeing half the content. It might be cutting off, they might not be able to click on the buttons. So because your experience being a device, a mobile, hello dog, he wants to be in the internet too. If you're only using a mobile device, you're less likely to be able to do the full range of what they call essential skills. So there's 13 essential skills defined by Ofcom, and they have found that if you only use a mobile device, you're 29% of those people can only do 4 out of the 13 essential skills, and they're considered narrow users. So being online doesn't mean you can do everything. Having access is not the same as full inclusion. And these stats here are from Lloyds Bank. So that's they found that 22% of UK adults lack essential digital skills for everyday life. And in a world that's increasingly digitized, it's easy to see how people are missing out and lacking the opportunity to thrive, and that's why it's something worth being passionate about in my mind. I'll start sharing that screen so that we can see each other again.
Okay, so those are all your myths.
Oh no, I've got 2 more myths.
Oh, have you? All right, keep going. Keep going. It's really
I've got 2 more, if that's okay.
Okay.
So these are a bit quicker. So the 4th, which I'm particularly passionate about as an SME in vulnerable experience generally, as well as inclusion, Myth number 4 is that vulnerable people can't use digital channels because they need lots of human support instead. And that really gets my goat, because firstly, that implies that because someone has a vulnerability, and we would define vulnerability as any type of mental or physical health condition, life events ranging from relationship breakdown or bereavement to being a carer, aspects of resilience, so that is your financial and emotional buffer when things go wrong in life, and fourthly, your capability with the English language and with maths and with digital. So low digital confidence itself is a vulnerability, but that doesn't mean that everyone who has a vulnerability is inept or unwilling to use the internet. And in fact, many vulnerabilities could be better supported online if the person's given that choice and is enabled appropriately. For example, assistive technology can be really helpful to someone with a visual impairment or a reading condition, where they can then have the content read to them instead of, or automatically magnified for someone with a visual impairment, instead of having documents that they then need a human to help them with. If someone has social anxiety or a speech impairment or a cognitive impairment, or even just a caring responsibility that makes them time poor, that could be really helpful to be able to do things digitally instead of not. So we should never cast that sort of broad brush approach to say that if someone has a vulnerability, they can't use digital channels. I'm going to be like a broken record, but it should always come down to customer choice. And I think a bit later we might talk a bit about equity and what that means in terms of digital channels. But I should cover my 5th myth first. And that is that digital inclusion means all people doing everything digitally all the time. And I think the first question you asked me is like, is the goal to get everyone online? And I said, no, it's our choice. And I would say, if there are people out there who, be honest with yourself, have you ever thought this? If you are thinking the aim of digital inclusion is that radical, that everyone should do everything online all the time, I would say that that is extreme thinking that is designed to make the argument for inclusion look stupid. I think that's illogical and it's unrealistic. And it becomes an excuse for not engaging with the systemic problem that is created by accelerated digitization. And conversely, there, I think, is an arrogance in believing that digital services are so universally intuitive, but so beautifully designed that even a monkey could use them. So I think we have to be, it's about having humanity and humility and being willing to walk in the shoes of people who might be left out or left behind by your digital services, and then asking, what can we do about it? And really, without wanting to do myself out of a job, that is all inclusion is.
Yeah. Okay, so those are really powerful myths. And I'm sure you could probably tell us a few more, but if I sum that up, I think if we get those wrong, they could be really detrimental. And what we probably need to do collectively is acknowledge these myths, acknowledge that they're incorrect, they're untrue, which will then give us a better understanding of those barriers to inclusion, and hopefully help us start to try and answer the why or the what and the how to digitally enable our people. I'll go back to people, or end users, customers, employees, whatever it may be. And I think the other thing you brought out a lot was that we're all just human, and we have thoughts and feelings. And I know you actually say this to me at least 3 times a week. We think and we feel, and we even do that around digital challenges. So understanding that emotions also play a critical role in how people engage. If we take more note of that and how they behave, and more note of their emotions, we might understand better how they will behave and interact with digitization, I guess. So
yeah, exactly. And that is why I love using personas, because I think especially if you're an innovator in the digital space, then because digitally is inherently does put a barrier between you and other humans. It can be great to keep connected, but it's not the same as seeing the whites of someone's eyes. And therefore, thinking about those who are left behind, those who are excluded, because that is the opposite of inclusion. But thinking about those who are excluded can sometimes just be an inconvenient or ignorable truth. But personas bring that to life. And then that has become a person that thinks and feels, but cannot necessarily do what they would like with your online channels. So yeah, I think we'll talk a bit more about personas, won't we? But yeah, I think it's so important to bring the human back into digital channels.
Yeah. Okay. So if that's your first challenge, I think was your second one mistrust.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And I know you've also told me this before, that trust is probably the most one of the most important human emotions.
It is. It's one of them. Well, it's one of the most fundamental, isn't it? You know, sorry, I am going to mention breasts. Like, the reason why breastfeeding is so important is because of the hormones that go on in the mother and the baby that creates that bond of trust. Like, it's you know, it's why skin time for any parent is important with that child. It builds trust. It's one of the most fundamental human emotions, perhaps even more than love. If you don't have trust, you do not have a base for any sort of relationship. Sorry, that got a bit deep there. I'm going to share some more stats if that's okay, and I'm going to share my screen to do that. Misquoting this famous song, what's trust got to do with it? And see what I did there. Okay, so if we accept that customers value the convenience of online, why isn't everyone doing it? And I think one of the big reasons is that they're wary of the trust, wary of risks, and therefore lack trust. And I don't think that's unwarranted. So simply telling people that it's safe and telling them that they should use it that's not going to be that's not going to work, because there's a foundation for their thoughts. So 1 in 3 are concerned about data security. 1 in 5 is concerned about the safety of their money when either spending or managing money online. And that's not unwarranted, because 61% of fraud is cyber related. And indeed, 50% of people were targeted with phishing last year. And when you're wary of the risks, even if there's an initial period of novelty about being online, or possibly even being forced to do something online because you couldn't do it offline, after that initial period of novelty, people will simply revert to the channels that they're more comfortable with. Familiarity breeds trust. My degree was in psychology, and one of the things that I loved learning in evolutionary psychology was that familiarity breeds trust, and it will say we interpret that as love, which is why if you have the good fortune to stay with the same partner for your whole life, even though both of you are looking more decrepit as the years go on, you still think you're beautiful, because you see familiarity as beautiful. You know, it feels not only comfortable, but you know, you have that warm feeling inside. So anyway, so I've just quashed everyone's beliefs about lifelong love there. But so familiarity breeds trust. That's why, for example, gamified onboarding plans are so successful on banking apps, because you're incentivized to use it frequently, become familiar, and then you trust that it works for you. However, if normal life continues and you're reminded by your neighbour or by the news that the internet is a scary place, that your data might not be safe, that people are robbed of their pensions, then maybe reality sets in, and you might start to question that newfound confidence that you had, or maybe that newfound trust that you had in the service. Some more stats. So NetApp found recently that 2 in 3 customers are looking for evidence-based reassurance that their data is safe before they share it, 2/3. And 48% of customers would be more willing to adopt digital online services if they heard more about online safety. So we mustn't think that if you're sitting there thinking, well, why would we talk about online safety? We don't want to plant that seed of doubt in people's minds. But these figures are stark. People are already doubting whether the benefits of digital are worth the risks. And in fact, if I show you this here, despite the benefits, trust can be eroded if people are pushed to digitize faster than they wanted to. So this is of people who are online. Ask the question, do the benefits of digital outweigh the risks? Only 58% of people said yes, and that's of the people who are online. 14% no, and 28% said they just weren't sure. So I think we have a lot of work to do in terms of people's confidence with being online.
I go back to my restaurant example. If there's two restaurants on the high street, one makes you log in to order and the other one doesn't, I can tell you exactly which restaurant I'm walking into. And it's such a silly example, but a good one, because I think probably a lot of people like me think, oh, you know, how do I want to use the service?
Yeah, exactly. And if you're given an opportunity to use an online service by sharing some of your data, it might be one time too many that day. You might be like, I'll go without the discount and not share my data. So we have to remember that our digital service is one of dozens that someone will have been confronted with that day, and think about, maybe people just reach their limit on how much trust they have in the system overall, or indeed how much mobile data they've got left.
And also, I mean, I think I did a whole webinar on this before, on how I got scammed myself. And I mean, I literally walk around teaching vulnerability, you know, and it's stuck to my forehead. And they got me. They got me good. And I thought, I, of all people, should know that I'm being scammed here. And I paid a lot of money to this organization, which was a large government organization, but they knew everything about me. But I think the thing that would have stopped that is if I had had communication from that organization to say, this is how we're going to engage with you. If we don't engage with you in this way, or anything else happens, be wary. So that also gives me a lot of context in you know, when it comes to trust. And now I know how I engage that organization, and it's usually a brown envelope through the door. But I didn't think that before, you know, and these scammers are just so clever. They know so much about you. So it's really important to have a mutual understanding of how you're going to engage with your customer to start building that trust.
Absolutely. And I would say a good place to start, so overcoming the barrier of mistrust, is always going to be human-centered design. So, you know, we've talked already about the importance of sort of, you know, remembering that we are human, our end users are human. And I'm sure many people listening in will know about human-centered design, but just to make sure that we're all on the same page before we carry on, I thought I'd share this illustration here, partly because, I mean, we love Running Man, don't we? This, you know, this background's one of our favorites. So the way that we think about human-centered design at Sopra Steria is these 3 steps. The first is to simply listen. So I guess if that organization had listened to your experience, Kerry, they might think differently about how they communicate about encouraging people to do things online. So listen to customers and to colleagues who often know a lot, being on the front line, about what customers say or would say about certain things. But it's not just listening to them after. I mean, that's a good thing to do, always seek feedback, but actually inclusive design or human-centered design is about listening to people throughout the design process, so starting by listening. And this means that your solutions will reflect real world experiences and not mere theory. And that also means that whatever you're designing, there's no grand ta-da moment where you launch it and then wait and see whether people will actually use it, because it's been grounded in the reality of their lives. So you already kind of know. That might sound less exciting to entrepreneurs out there, but we would say it's always best to launch something with no surprises. The second aspect is to collaborate, so to share insights and work with partners to optimize customer experiences and outcomes. We talk a lot about outcomes in inclusion work. It's not the process that matters, it's the end result for your customers, members, citizens, end users, whatever you call them in your organization. And again, the outcome that we've defined here is that involving customers, colleagues and partners, it does take time. You might have to persuade your investors to wait longer for the launch, but you can reassure them that it creates more innovative solutions and will have more buy-in with all stakeholders when it does launch. It's just more likely to be a success. And then lastly, to respond to what you've heard and consider the whole design. So don't try and just fix one issue in isolation, but consider the entire journey, because that is how we experience things as end users or customers, isn't it? We are thinking, feeling beings. We don't think about a process, we think about the experience. So by acting on people's feedback, it means that the whole experience will have more sustainable outcomes. That is, you don't launch something and then end up having to find a sort of workaround for things that aren't working, or you get like an influx of customer queries because something's not working for them. And I like to use the expression co-beneficiaries of change. So I think because of the fast pace of digitization, I think it's fair to say that there's some people in society that have felt like victims of change, victims of digitization. Maybe they would describe being forced to do things online, particularly during the pandemic when they couldn't get hold of human services so easily. I think together, if we consider mistrust that's been built up, sometimes through our own actions, and use human-centered design, and draw a line and re-engage in a way that better reflects the trust that we want to build, then we have a chance of our end users feeling like co-beneficiaries, like they can see what's in it for them and not just in it for us. They're not just suspicious of us taking humans away. Like I was in a well-known supermarket yesterday, and someone who obviously shops there quite often was literally up in arms. She was bawling because they have replaced half the checkouts with self-serve. She doesn't do computers, is what she was saying. And the poor staff member was there to try and train her on how to do self-serve. And she was like, I'm not going to use it. You're going to have to open that till for me. She is not feeling like a co-beneficiary of change there. She is definitely feeling like a victim. Yeah.
My son, on the other hand, is 80. He wouldn't know what to do if he went to an actual real life cashier. What it speaks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So should we talk about some personas that we've got here then?
So.
I'm just going to flash them up on screen.
Yeah. We need to speed up a bit because I know how much you've got coming.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to talk about these really quickly then. So I've given them all names. I really apologise if they sound stereotypical. They're not intended to. They're just intended to be alliterative because I like alliteration. So here we've got Digiphobe Doris, and we all know someone like Doris. She's 82 years old. She's a devoted nana. She is not going to use online services. She's really not interested in online services. And that reflects about 6 to 8% of the population, the UK population. Then we've got Tentative Terry. He is 66 years young. He's loving his retirement. You'd recognise him on the golf course because he's standing there with his phone, texting his nephew in font size 40. Yeah, we all know Terry. I just love Terry. So he is feeling pretty confident now that he's online, but that might mean that he is more susceptible to scamming. Maybe it's a newfound novel confidence that he's got. What support does he need? That's 22% of the population roughly. Then we've got Learning Loreto. So she's mid-40s, living life to the full. She will happily use her phone for communication and research, but is a bit wary of sharing information, and she's a bit wary about managing money, doing transactions online. And I know this is a really broad range, but it really depends on which research you look at. That's between 5 and 29% of the population. And then we've got self-serve Sam. So this is the majority. And this is someone who would describe themselves as digital native. They probably have multiple devices on the go at once, and they use it for every aspect of life. And frankly, they're pretty annoyed if they end up having to speak to a human. Now, that's a generalization because, as we've said, it varies by context and by task. But the great thing about having personas is everyone can start thinking about what it feels to be like one of these people, one of these segments. And if you were to create a digital enablement strategy, you'd create them for your base. You'd use human-centered design, you'd do research, you'd listen to what people are thinking, feeling, and doing about digital, and then you'd create your own personas. But we just wanted to share these as examples.
How many would you have? Would you have 4, or would you have?
I mean, it would depend. I would between 4 and 12 would probably be manageable. You wouldn't want to have more than 12 because you'd forget their names. But yeah, to be representative of your customer base, it would usually be more than 4.
Okay, so I've got one for you. Kickback Kerry. Doesn't have to do anything, and AI just like if the shopping app just does it all for you.
So you want an AI bot that knows what shopping you need and is just going to place that order.
You don't have to make any decisions. Does it all for you.
Okay. And you're looking for an AI bot that knows how to stack the fridge when it arrives as well. Yeah.
And I think, please, that yes. But I think my other thoughts when I see these all the time is, do you expect a tentative Terry to always be a tentative Terry throughout the end to end? No.
No, and that's the thing. So some people don't like personas because it pigeonholes people. And someone doesn't like thinking that they could be so similar to someone else that they would fall into a bucket. Personas are not there to describe all the uniqueness of our end users. It's there to group their commonalities, to make them easier to refer to. It's easier to refer to Terry than describe his circumstances every time. And it's also then it's a design tool. It's a way of making sure that your main journey, so your happy path journey, works for as many personas as possible. And it's also a way of making sure that you have alternatives that are going to resonate with what your personas think, feel, and do. And so it's a design tool. You would never ever talk to an end user about which persona they are. and it's never going to be a perfect fit. But you know, if you had 6, 8, 12, most people will fit one.
Yeah. Just a note on you, Joanna's she's created some beautiful personas for some of our customers, and it's amazing how the business has onboarded these customers. They almost like have befriended the personas.
Yeah,
when they come back
come to their Christmas party.
Yeah. It's really good. All right, that's really makes sense. I know you're going to put it into a customer journey next, so
yeah. Well, so should we move on to mass market then? Because I know time marches on, and actually I think we're there anyway, aren't we? So I'm just going to briefly share what the digital inclusion scale is, because then we get to talk about how it works for these personas and what it means. What digital enablement means. And the spoiler is it means shifting people right on the scale. So I'll show you the scale now. Hope that's showing okay.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So this is the digital inclusion scale, which the government created. And it's got 9 stages to it, as you can see, from never have, never will, all the way over to expert. And I'm sure that you're already noticing that the colours that we used for our personas actually match up to this. So here is DigiFlow Doris down at this end, and here is Self-Serve Sam, and then in the middle you've got Terry and Loreto. And digital inclusion describes someone's current state. So it describes whether someone has access, and that means having a device and then a connection, whether that's mobile data or broadband. So, you know, the sorts of questions you ask there is, what device is someone using to get online? Do they have a reliable connection? Do they have a limit on their internet data? And then under capabilities, so that is to do with someone's skills and confidence. Is someone able to learn and retain digital skills? What are their learning and support preferences, and how confident are they using digital skills? But as I said, digital enablement is about moving people right on this scale. And so we need to ask questions like, how motivated is someone to adopt digital services? What are the practical and perceptual barriers they're facing? Are they willing to overcome these barriers? What support would they need? What would they welcome from you? Or who is best placed to provide that support? And they're the sorts of questions that you start covering when you look at digital enablement. So it's a way of applying human-centered design to enhance your customer experience in a way that nurtures confidence, motivation, and trust. And there's 4 key ways that you do that. and that's through targeted campaigns. So once you've got your segments or your customer personas, then you know better what you need to say to them and what self-help resources, be they videos or step-by-step guides or even just checklists of how to follow a process and keep safe whilst doing it. A targeted campaign could also be about safety itself. You could use peer advocacy, which is a great tool for building trust, because then people are hearing it from someone like them, not from you, if they're suspicious about why you might encourage them to do it. So there you've got your targeted campaigns and self-help resources. And on this side, you've got the assisted service, by which we mean, instead of having digital services and non-digital services, I guess it goes back to one of the myths, no one is wholly digital or not. So assisted digital services, where at every interaction, unless someone has identified as being in the Doris segment and not at all interested in being online, then at every interaction you at least present the opportunity or the possibility of doing things online. And I don't mean really irritating IVR messages that keep you on hold, telling you on repeat that you could be doing this online. What I mean is, if Terry phoned up and said, oh, hello, I'd like to purchase such and such, say, oh, Terry, we've noticed that you've been looking at that thing on the app. Can I help you finish your transaction there? Do you have time for me to talk you through how to do that? That's what we would call do it with me support. And actually I can show you that bit. So a digital enablement strategy is built around these: do it for me, do it with me, and do it myself. So again, that's chunking these 9 steps of the digital inclusion scale into 3 general customer behaviours or attitudes towards digital service. And digital coaching is like going into the lay-by. So if you think about assisted digital service being like roadside assistance, keeping someone on the digital journey, but providing them the support they need, digital coaching is like pulling off into maybe the garage and getting under the bonnet and saying, Terry, what barriers are you facing to doing things online? Maybe he has terrible mobile signal at home and could do with hearing about social broadband so that he can get Wi-Fi connection. Maybe he's concerned about safety. Maybe he just doesn't know how to download an app. So you can identify what the barriers Terry is facing are and then coach him through those so that he's ready to get back onto his digital journey again. So that's a sort of whistle-stop tour of the 4 main components of a digital enablement strategy. And as I said, they're all geared towards shifting people to the right.
Yeah. So what you've got your personas, who are, let's say, tentative Terry. Tentative Terry, we know, is in the middle of the scale, but every now and then he jumps to a digiphobe Doris for some part of the journey. Then he comes back to being a tentative Terry and he stays there for a while, and then he wants to do something else and he pops to a do it myself journey. So it's constantly changing, Joanna. So how do you keep on top of these changes? And so if you have, let's say you have an end-to-end, I mean, banking, right? You do so many different tasks with banking. If you take that as an example, and you might do withdrawals one way, you might do money in another way, you might do your statements in a different way. How do you keep on top of what Terry wants when he's a digiphobe, when he's a tentative, when he's a self-serve?
Sure.
Yeah,
and I guess that's why it needs to be part of an overall strategy. And when I say shifting someone to the right, that doesn't mean as a permanent state, and it doesn't mean everyone's destination is to be Sam. So if someone is defined as a tentative Terry, that doesn't mean he always wants do it with me support. It's just that's likely to be his default. And there will be some times when he says, no, thank you, I just want you to do it for me. And there'll be some times when he surprises himself and he does it without any support. Or maybe he uses one of your self-help guides that you've provided him. So over time, he might shift more to being a Loreto. He may eventually end up being a self-serve Sam. So someone's persona describes where they're at just now and their potential for shifting forward. But actually, below all this, you'd have some quite complex propensity modelling that would say, like, which tasks or which activities on your digital service is Terry likely to do, and therefore what help is it right to offer, or what support would be appropriate to offer depending on what he's doing. So if Terry phones in and says, oh, I've locked myself out, can I have a password reset? And you know that Terry phones up pretty much every week for a password reset. That might be a good opportunity to offer a self-help resource and say, can we give you the step-by-step guide? We'll talk you through it this time. And then next time, have a go with this self-help resource. So you can see that actually the soft skills and the confidence of your people in these situations is absolutely paramount to making sure that Terry always feels that your role is to enable, hence digital enablement, to enable him to do what he feels capable of doing, to give him that opportunity without ever forcing him to.
Yeah.
And if Terry is indicating that he's either time poor, doesn't have time to be taught something new today, or you've got to the point where you've tried self-help resources, you've tried coaching, and still Terry phones up every Friday for a password reset, that's an example of where you might just want to kind of accept that that's going to persist. So it's always being responsive to the individual whilst understanding their likely behaviours, their propensity for doing different things in different channels. And then the thing that I love about propensity modelling is that you get all this rich data coming back from how Terry responds to what you offer him, and then you can see the impact of it. And the goal, as I say, is not to get everyone to be Sam. The goal is to shift people to the right where it's possible, to create that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important message, because we're a transformation organization, so many of our customers say we need to digitize and automate, and it's going to improve our efficiency and our cost to serve considerably if everyone is in the green bracket. But actually what we found is that if you just service and respond and engage with that customer in the right block, that's where you get your operational efficiency. And it's taken a while to sort of start to see those kind of outcomes, but it's not about shifting to the right. It's about responding in the right way at the right time, the first time, isn't it?
Absolutely. And that, I guess, is one of the, and probably the last thing that we'll talk about is social value and the balance between striving for operational efficiency, which of course is one of the benefits of digital services, but balancing that with the other benefits of doing it well. So you could get temporary operational efficiency by just preventing people accessing a human, but that will erode trust and it will erode your brand value. And ultimately, by the time someone gets through to a human, they're going to be so raging that it's not going to be a quick conversation. You're going to see more complaints, etc. So so we've done some work about social value, which is about how can you deliver business services in a way that improves outcomes for society, and how can you do that in a measurable way. And so overall, the way that we think about digital enablement is that it should be part of the solution to a systemic problem. The system, like the way that we operate in society, is increasingly digitized. And that's okay, because that's what the majority of customers want because of the convenience, and it's cost efficient and scalable. These are all good things. However, as noted, it's not an equitable shift. And I was meaning to define that. So inclusion, if I can just use an analogy, it's the easiest way to describe the difference between inclusion, equality, and equity. So if you had an apple tree, you could stick a sign to it saying, everyone's welcome to pick the apples. And that's being inclusive, because you're saying that everyone can, you've given permission. However, if one person was tall and could reach the apples, they have an advantage over someone who is perhaps height impaired or shorter. So instead, you could put a ladder with the sign, and that would be equality, because then everyone sort of has equal access to it, because the shorter person could climb the ladder. However, the trouble with mere equality is that you're putting the onus and the effort on the part of the end user. You've not actually solved the problem. Whereas lowering a branch so that people of any height can reach the apples. That is equity. That is creating a level playing field so that everyone can get the same end outcome without being made to feel different. That's the difference. And here
Yeah.
we're trying to create an equitable shift so people don't maybe even notice the support that they've been given, that those with vulnerabilities or those with low income, who are usually more likely to be left behind, are not left behind by digitisation. In this way, digitisation can create a social problem, but it can also create an opportunity, because if we all as digital leaders invest in digital enablement so that everyone can keep up with the pace of change, then your service can be part of the solution to creating equitable outcomes, and it brings social value to the heart of the proposition. So as well as operational efficiencies, which you've already mentioned, and I think it's obvious to say how operational efficiency can be an outcome, and that's a good thing, because if you can create a virtuous circle where people who want to do things themselves can do so very easily, that releases your resources, whether it's people or money, to invest back into your staff, your communities, your customers. So operational efficiency is a good thing, and I'm not saying it's not. But there are other benefits of using human-centered design to adopt digital enablement. And the first is to do with customer engagement. If digital engagement is giving customers a choice, they can choose to have that ease and efficiency when they want it. I'm thinking about the 3 E's of great customer experience. That's ease, efficiency, and emotion. So they have the choice to have ease and efficiency when they want, because they've been empowered to engage on their terms. But when the task at hand is emotionally charged, sometimes we might want to speak to a person. For example, at the minute, due to the cost of living crisis, you've got a whole new cohort of people who are getting into debt for the first time, the squeezed middle. And if you're in debt for the first time and you need to engage with one of your utility providers, let's say, or a debt management service, you might not want to speak to a person. Like, you might be tired of explaining your circumstances to strangers, you might fear judgment. So if you're offered a way of doing it digitally, then it's taking the emotion out of it in a way. And so that provides a very cost efficient, socially normal way of getting things done. And a quick text reminder to remind someone of how to access help when behind on bills is a lot less threatening than a brown envelope on the doormat that you're unsure whether to open. So again, it's important to not think of digital service as being universal and the same for everyone, but of using your human-centered research and your personas to understand what communication and support people need at different times in a journey to create good outcomes for everyone. It's not treating everyone the same, but it's treating everyone as equal in value and as having valid differences in how they might think and feel and what they might do with your digital services. And that's why they're so powerful. And then one of the other benefits is to do with colleague engagement. There's a lot of focus these days about what good work looks like, good and meaningful work. And the younger generation in particular want purpose as well as pay. And they have really high moral expectations of leaders. And that's where training people in digital enablement can become really empowering for them, because they can convert a potentially difficult conversation into something where they are giving people the chance to thrive, not only using your service but other services. And as you shift people to the right and customers undertake perhaps the simpler tasks themselves, that's freeing up your colleagues to have the more meaningful, longer conversations with people like Doris or Terry that might need it. And that's making their work more varied, more interesting, more engaging. And it becomes part of a genuine way of demonstrating your social value, both internally and externally. So that's why I think that digital enablement aligns really well to social value as well. Yeah.
Oh, Joanna, it's been as always so good just listening to you distill all from the myths to the challenges to the solutions. I think I'm lucky, obviously super lucky enough to get to work with you every day, but I just want to thank you for your time and for just pouring all that information out for us. And I hope that it's left everybody with something really interesting to think about. I definitely believe everyone has learnt something today. So again, thank you very much, Joanna. And I'm going to remember the apple tree analogy forever, because that makes really clear.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So thank you to everyone also for listening in. Please reach out to myself and Joanna. We as I say, we don't want this conversation to end here today.
No.
I think, or Joanna stopped sharing the screen. What we'll do is we'll have our contact details available. If you do want to, carry on with the discussions with us, we'd be more than well happy to do so. So take care, everybody. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Joanna.